everybody. Today is Wednesday, September 2nd. This is kind of a special meeting. We needed to approve a couple of items tonight and do our Code of Conduct public hearing. Can I get a motion to open the meeting?
Lisa, so moved.
Can I get a second? Okay. Great. Thank you very much. So tonight's meeting format on video is going to be a little different. We're trying something else out. We got some feedback that people would rather see our smiling faces than the agenda. So if you would like to follow along with the agenda, you can go to boarddocs.com. There's a link from the school website as well, and you can look at the agenda there. Okay. Greg, were you able to get a little icon of the agenda up? It doesn't look like it.
Unfortunately, I was not.
Okay. All right. So if you do want to follow along with the agenda, you'll have to go to the website and pull that up. Our first order of business is to approve the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to Lori's approve the consent agenda? Thank you. Can I get a second, Bill? Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and before we go to the public hearing for the Code of Conduct, for those who don't have our smiling faces on their screen, can we do a roll call?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
This is Carmen. Hi. Carol Abraham.
Here.
Lisa Anderson.
Here.
Mary Pat Brugge. Absent. Corey Natrika.
Here.
Alexandra Philbin.
Here.
William Oricchio. And I think, Bill, you have muted?
Yeah, turn on mute.
Here.
Lori Ryan.
Here. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to our public hearing on the Code of Conduct. We do this every year. It's a chance for the public to make comments on the Code of Conduct. And it is a requirement for us to do that before the code goes into effect for the new school year. So, Carmen, did we have any comments from the public about the Code of Conduct?
We did not.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we can move on. Does anybody need anything pulled from the consent agenda this evening?
Nope.
No. Okay. All right, that's good since I already had you guys approve the consent agenda. So there is an item that was removed from the consent agenda, which is a donation. It is a donation from an employee of New York Life. We see this recurrently, and it is very, very generous. There are actually two donations for $740 total. And the donation is made possible through the New York Life Foundation for the Hendrick Hudson School District. Can I get a motion to approve that donation, please? Lori Ryan, a motion. And can I have a second?
Lisa Anderson.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. So that brings us to our Superintendents Report.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. As Dr. Abraham said, this is a standard meeting we have as we get close to opening the school year, because we have a series of shifts in terms of staff and resignations or appointments or leaves of absence. So I want to first thank the board for coming together on short notice to make sure we can make sure we have everyone lined up to go as we open the school year. We do have another meeting next week on the 9th of September, and we'll share our larger conversation about reopening schools and preparedness and what we've been up to over the last couple of weeks. But I do want to touch on a couple topics that are important. We've heard from some families with regards to driver's education. Driver's education began in our district last February, and it began with the 5-hour course, and many students were able to complete about 80% of those hours. And working with New York State, as well as some attestation from families, those students are going to be able to finish their 5-hour course We did have to issue some refunds, but we're sending those back to families. And in fact, I think it's by the end of next week, students will receive their certificate that they completed the 5-hour course and can move on in their driver preparation program. With regards to driver's education specifically, we are not able to offer it for a number of reasons. One, social distancing guidelines. Two, the number of students who are allowed in the vehicle has been reduced to just one. So we are working with our high school families to get information to them on local companies and regional companies where they could go through driver's education, make sure their sons and daughters are ready for the world of driving, especially on our roads around here. So if you're a high school parent and you're listening, look for some information either directly from the high school or from our transportation department that coordinates driver's ed. That will go out by the end of next week. Speaking of our high school, I'll add the middle school. High school and middle school schedules are being wrapped up. They should be available to students within the next 7 days. I think the high school schedules will be available over the weekend on the portal, so that's good news. As we enter our school year with our hybrid model, it's going to be different for middle school and high school students. A group of students will attend on Monday and Tuesday. A different group of students will attend on Thursday and Friday. They'll see all their teachers throughout the week, but also the hybrid piece is that students will have 3 days of remote instruction in addition to the 2 days they're in school. So the schedules were a little bit different to put together this year with different nuances and different considerations, trying to limit the amount of hallway traffic, trying to reduce the number of transitions. So we thank everyone for their patience. In the same vein, our elementary schedules are wrapping up. As you know, the governor did give permission to school districts to create a full-time remote model for elementary students. That has really put a hamper and a stress on our staff, and stress meaning the staff that we have. Our guidelines from the Department of Health and CDC called for around 15 students per classroom in the elementary school. We are one of very few districts in our region that can welcome back our students K-5 every day. Many schools are rotating students or half days or a couple days a week. So we have our in-school model has around 15 students. That's because we have a significant number that have chosen the remote model. And just a reminder to parents, the reason we ask parents to make that commitment for the semester is so we don't have students coming back and forth, because we have to lock in class size and we have to lock in teachers. And the more students come from a remote model back to the in-school model, it throws our calculations off. For example, we had a number of families reach out to their respective elementary schools and say that they really want to start in person on September 29th, and that has created some space issues because our caps were around 15, and our caps were at 15 so that everyone could be at least 6 feet apart for social distancing. So we're going to have some space issues, which means we're going to have to reach out to families one more time and ask if anyone does want to go remote, because we will not be able to have all of the students in a classroom and maintain 6 feet social distancing. So that is why back in August, when we asked families to commit, that they really needed to commit for a good chunk of time so that we could build 2 schools. And that's really what we've done at the elementary level. We've built an in-school school and a remote school. And we're using the same staff. So that's why there's incredible stress on the staffing at the elementary, and that's why we really have to have a hard cutoff. But we'll be communicating with elementary families tomorrow about that and be reaching out to some individually. And lastly, please continue to check out our website. We have a number of updates that we've posted over the last week or so. We've posted more FAQs. Thank you to our PTA leaders who fielded many of those questions over the last week plus, as our 5 schools did back-to-school meetings and helped orient parents to what the environment will look like and how different it will be in our 5 schools. And so we continuously update that document. They're time-stamped, so you'll know when there's new information on that FAQ. We're also working with BOCES to produce instructional videos and return the school documents for students and families. A series of different one-pagers by topic as we return to school about mask wearing or keeping your distance at the bus stop or on the school bus. We have a couple, as I mentioned, instructional videos, sort of cartoon-like videos for elementary students to watch and hopefully absorb, because their experience is going to be much different than the experience they left last year. So as we gear up, we're excited, but we also know this is going to be a much different beginning to the school year. And the weather alone certainly doesn't feel like back-to-school weather, but we're working with our staff over the next 4 days to really rehearse with them how things will be different, try to get them acclimated and build new muscle memories. I've been saying for a number of months, our team has been saying for a number of months, the institution of public education has been rocked, and it will be different for a little while. We know that this isn't permanent, but we have to operate our schools with a different approach in terms of safety and health considerations. Certainly our staff are ready to work with students and provide them a rigorous and enriching academic experience. But the cadence to the day is going to feel a little bit different, and that's why we're easing our way into the school year over the next couple weeks, and certainly all students will join us who choose the in-school model will join us on September 29th. But those are just some quick updates. We'll have a more thorough report with the rest of our team next Wednesday on the 9th.
Thank you, Joe. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? I had one question. I know we talked about this before already, but there were some parents that were concerned about their remote students getting art and music instruction at home, and whether we were going to be able to accomplish that for the elementary mostly.
Yeah, that certainly is our goal. What we're working on right now is to make sure that our in-school staffing is set in terms of all of the electives, and then we'll schedule them for the remote students. It will be different, of course, because in terms of supplies or materials or just the hands-on experience. But certainly that has always been our intention, to be able to provide all of those academic experiences so the students that choose the remote option still have access.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we move on? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. And again, as I see our neighboring districts struggling with this, and New York City making very late decisions on going to remote, again, I like to applaud our administrative staff for having the foresight to make this decision a little earlier so that our parents had time to plan their schedules, especially for the elementary kids. All right, so next is committee reports. Does anybody have a committee report? Lisa, go ahead.
The unmute button wasn't working. Sorry. So I went to Westchester Putnam School Board Association had an advocacy meeting on Monday night that I attended. And just to sort of give you a heads up about some of the advocacy issues that we identified that we're going to be working toward as an organization, as a region, most of the things are focusing around COVID. Specifically, there was an overwhelming number of people who wanted to try to encourage our federal elected officials to increase the funding for public education. And one of the things that we're going to be trying to do is to actually see if we can encourage people in other states to join with us in this effort to encourage support from with federal funds for public education across our nation. Our legislative people, our congressional representatives, our senators are very much on board behind this effort, and we need to try to work with some other states that might be a little bit more convincing. The other areas that were really high priority issues was compensatory special education services related to COVID, and applying for a waiver for the spring of 2021 mandated testing, and Department of Health guidance on school district closing metrics. That was something that a lot of the districts felt that they weren't getting very much guidance from the Department of Health on, and that we could maybe try to encourage that along as well. Some of the areas that are not COVID related have to do with foundation aid kind of the perennial elephant in the room there. There's, we're trying to get our full funding of foundation aid and encourage them to group our districts that are in Westchester Putnam School Boards Association with similar regional cost areas. One of the problems we've had for a long time has been that we're not lumped with areas that have similar cost of living indexes as we do. As we do. Instead, we're being lumped with other regions, and we're more similar to Long Island and to New York City, actually, than the areas that we're being lumped with. So we're going to be trying to encourage that to happen, and updating the foundation aid formula was another big one. Of course, there's still requests to, an encouragement to help add flexibility to funds for mental health. There's going to be a great need for that this fall. We're seeing anyway. And there's the other thing was, again, mental health, recognizing recess as a part of the school day, which I thought was an interesting one that got some traction. Some places, I guess it's not, and, trying to get recognition that it's an important part of the school day. So anyway, there's a couple different things that are coming up. I sent you all the letter that that would go to our federal representatives requesting that aid that I was talking about earlier. And hopefully at our next meeting we can go through that and make any changes that we want to. As well as there's a resolution that was created by Pleasantville School District to encourage the every school student, the ESA, every
Student Succeeds Act.
There we go. Every Student Succeeds Act. To encourage our federal people, again, as well as our state people, to give us some leniency with testing. We're kind of projecting that it's going to be hard to do testing this spring. And so getting that leniency in place now would certainly make things easier for our school year and allow our teachers and everybody to focus more on really meeting the needs of the students where they currently are. So that's it.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, most of our testing the past, 5 years has really not been correlated year to year very well, and this year completely not going to be like the other years. So hopefully there will be some leniency in that regard, and I look forward to discussing the letter and the resolution next week at our regular meeting. Did anybody have any questions for Lisa before we move on to find out if anybody else has committee reports? Okay, thank you so much for attending those meetings. I wish they would kind of vary the time a little bit, so some of them were in the evenings rather than the middle of the day. But I understand everybody's schedule requirements, and it's nice to have them at a predictable time every month. But maybe you can pass that along. Every once in a while, maybe they could schedule them in the evenings so that those of us who work during the daytime could attend as well.
Will do.
All right, so our next segment is audience comments. Carmen, did we have anybody with comments today?
Yes, we have one comment letter to be read and to be put into the public. So on Monday, August 31st, we received an email from the Secretary of the HHEA, a letter to be read and put into the record to the Board of Education. So I'm going to read the letter that they sent in. To the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education, the health, safety, and well-being of our students, teachers, staff, and their families are the most important consideration in determining whether schools should reopen or in-person learning. None of us are looking forward to a remote start to the beginning of the year. Last spring was the most difficult challenge to all involved, students, educators, and families. We lost our routines, our physical connections to the students, and space that becomes our second home. Computers offer only a slight reflection of the actual connection created between student and teacher. It is the position of the teachers of the Hendrick Hudson school community that students cannot learn and teachers cannot teach if they do not feel safe and supported. More than that, we need to actually be safe, not just feel safe. Both the Board of Education and the staff of the Hendrick Hudson School District share the goal of health and safety of our students, staff, and community. This must be the district's priority. To achieve the safest possible in-school environment for all students and staff, the following guidelines, conditions, and measures must be implemented prior to teaching in the buildings. These protocols will be communicated in writing to all members of the school community. The following basic safety precautions require immediate attention and implementation. Universal mask wearing, scheduling, and clear written procedures to create adequate physical distancing and absolute necessary in indoor spaces. Flexibility of the teaching staff to use outdoor spaces when feasible, which will also alleviate risk. A clear and consistent plan regarding safety practices for classroom use, hallway passing, and mask breaks is needed. High-quality, effective PPE and protocol for replacing PPE as needed must be provided to staff and students. All construction must be completed before the beginning of the school year. This includes the professional development days scheduled for September. All air filtration systems must be in place and working before staff return to the buildings in September. All written protocols mandated by the New York State Education Department in their reopening guidance must be shared with all stakeholders, including parents, students, teachers, and staff. As enhanced ventilation mitigates the spread of the coronavirus, the following improvements must be implemented and verified in all buildings. Request current HVAC information and consult with indoor air specialists. All HVAC systems tested and improved to provide MERV 13 or higher filtration. Classrooms not connected to central HVAC systems must be upgraded as necessary. All classrooms must be provided with the best air filtration systems, and additional air filtration must be outfitted with proper sized individual portable HEPA UV filtration unit and UVC disinfection technology. Each room to be occupied by students and staff should be individually assessed for ventilation risk. Indoor air quality can be monitored by providing temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide monitors for classrooms. These assessments should be disseminated to staff and parents. Then the following NYSET approved ventilation checklist must be filled out weekly. They give a web link for that. All buildings must be staffed by a nurse, and proper tracking and isolation protocols be put into place before anyone enters the building. Additionally, adequate custodial staff is required to maintain a daily, competent, and high level of cleanliness. It has been stated by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention that, in general, the closer, longer, and more frequent the interaction between students, teachers, and staff, the higher the risk of respiratory droplets being passed between people. Block scheduling increases time of exposure and therefore increases risk of viral spread. Scheduling should reflect the goal to lessen exposure for staff and students. The middle school and high school teachers can continue to deliver an excellent education to their students using the current model period schedules that pose less risk of viral spread. We will wish to return to school, but most importantly, we wish to return to school setting that is safe for our students, staff, and community. As teachers, we are willing to teach remotely and continue to communicate and collaborate with the Hendrick-Hudson School District until this is achieved. Sincerely, the following members of the Hendrick-Hudson Education Association. The letter was signed by 153 teachers. So we will put that into the record, into the Board of Education minutes.
Thank you very much, Carmen, and we certainly appreciate the input of our teachers. I know that there's continuing dialogue between the administrators and the teachers as well. And just for the public's information, comments should usually be kept to about 3 minutes. Of course, we only have one comment tonight, so we have quite a bit of leeway in that for this evening, but just to clarify that point. And that will bring us to our board comments and new business section. And let's start with our meeting format. As you can see, we are all talking heads tonight. And please, public out there, if you want to give us feedback on how well you can hear us, how well you can see us, etc. We also asked Mr. Hochreiter to start looking into what it would mean for us to go into one of the school buildings to do in-person meetings, how much that would entail, and what the added cost expenditures might be. So I believe he has some information for us on that.
Yeah, so one model that districts in our region are moving toward are having Board of Education meet together, socially distanced in a large space in a school, and having that meeting filmed without an audience present. The open meetings law permits that, and the executive order that still is in place, I believe, until the 4th, also permits that, so long as the meeting is live streamed. So it would almost be like how our meetings used to be, where the camera is focused on the board and whatever on the Board of Education and whatever presentations there are. But there would not be a live audience, and that meeting would be live streamed to our YouTube channel. It poses some challenges opening our schools to anyone requires whoever comes in, so in this case the board, administration, Greg, who helps produce our board meetings, would have to fill out the attestation that you don't have a fever and that you don't have COVID symptoms. We would all need to wear a mask. But we will need to work with our custodians because it's possible that the model could incur overtime. And the reason I say that is because the space where we would meet, wherever it would be in our district, would then again need to be thoroughly cleaned in preparation for students coming the next day. So it's not insurmountable, but depending on where we would meet and what day and what time, there could be a cost to that. And the reason I say there could be a cost to that, because we have a cadence of meeting on Wednesdays. A meeting anywhere in our district on Wednesday could incur some overtime costs because let's use the high school cafeteria or library as an example. Two large spaces where we have met in the past. That space will be cleaned by Tuesday afternoon before instruction begins on Wednesday, because while students are still remote, that space could be used by staff. It could be used by any number of programs. So it would have to be then thoroughly cleaned again after we use it on Wednesday. So that's one option. The next option would be to do that and then invite the public. We would be limited to 50% capacity of what the space can normally hold. And we would need to make sure we enforce mask wearing and enforce social distancing. Again, anyone coming into our school, even the public for purposes of viewing the board meeting, would also need to fill out the COVID attestation. But we would need some staff to supervise that. We would need some staff to check residents in, and depending on the capacity, we may need staff to basically help us enforce mask wearing and social distancing. So that also would incur a cost, because typically that would be our security personnel. There had been times where we have had security at board meetings just because we anticipated large numbers, or there were just a lot of activities going on at the school. So that certainly would incur overtime over the course of each meeting and each month. So some of the specifics, if we wish to go back to live meetings, which the governor may demand that by not extending the executive order at the end of the week, but we'll have to be a little more specific with where we would like to meet, first of all, and then if we want to keep it on Wednesdays, and at what
time. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Corey.
I was just wondering, if we were to meet somewhere, would we be wearing masks during the meeting? I would assume yes.
Yes.
Wouldn't that impact the video and ability? Just like there are a lot of logistics that we'd have to get over to make sure that everybody could hear us, right?
Right. Yeah, the camera would have to be pretty far back because we're all sitting 6 feet apart. And I think hearing each other is going to be a challenge, honestly. I don't know if you took part in many of the meetings that we used to do in the cafeteria when we had the retirement celebrations, those things. But just sitting at that table with the noise in that room, I personally always found it very difficult to hear what the other board members were saying. So if we chose that room, that might be a little bit of a challenge. And the library, with the bookcases and things, I don't know how well. We'd have to try out spreading out and still being visible with the camera.
We used to have personal mics. I don't know if those just picked up our voices or if they actually broadcasted and made them louder or not.
They just picked up our voices for the video, but it didn't broadcast our voices to each other.
Okay.
Correct.
Questions, comments? Bill?
I would think the library would be tough to get everybody effectively in a spread out in a fashion that would be easily to communicate with each other and video at the same time. And Joe, as a question, if we were to move our board meetings to, say, a Tuesday night, would that make it easier for the custodial staff to do their cleaning, possibly?
It could. If we met on Tuesday night, they possibly could hold off on that space until our meeting was over and then go and do their deep cleaning. That's a logistics conversation I'd have to have with Anthony. But I know that we have incurred overtime when we met at the in the library. Just if we had a long meeting, that staff that shift has a cutoff time, and they would literally have to take apart the tables and the chairs and the technology, and then put the cafeteria back together. That may not be as big of a concern, but I can see that if we meet on a Tuesday night, would that speed up the cleaning process in terms of preparing the building? But I also know Tuesdays may not work for everyone either, so it's a
right.
discussion.
You might have to start the meetings without me if we move to Tuesday nights.
I can also have a problem
Alex?
with this as well.
But this might, if the governor doesn't extend the executive order on the 4th, we might be pushed into a decision anyway, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then my other thought was, I know both of our auditoriums are under construction right now, but maybe potentially we could all sit on the stage in like a U shape, and just brainstorming. That might be a solution further down the road.
True. We've always met in the high school or in the district office, and I don't know if that was because that's where we have most of the AV equipment or whether there were other issues with using the elementary school spaces. But we could certainly consider that as well, I guess.
Yeah, this whole conversation has really come full circle because it all began around safety practices. We moved our board meetings from the high school to the boardroom downstairs where I am, so that an entire building was not open and accessible to basically anybody if there wasn't another school-related event happening. So we tried to, we did. We moved the meetings here for safety reasons. We did save money on overtime. The meetings, I think, and I'll let the board discuss, but being in the closer quarters, they were a little more intimate. They were more of a meeting and a discussion as opposed to in the past. In a horseshoe, they were really it was a display for the camera because it was really hard to engage with one another. But
yeah, I felt like it really facilitated discussion, having us a little bit closer, easier to hear each other and see each other's facial expressions. I remember when we were in the horseshoe shape, especially sitting at the top, it was really hard to see people to either side and continue that discussion. For me, anyway. I don't know. Maybe other people didn't have as much of a problem with it, but so
there will be benefits and drawbacks because now we'll be socially distanced and we'll have masks on, and it will just feel stiff. It will feel different. But that was the reason we moved the meetings. And if we go back, it will be a same concern. We may need to, depending on the location or what school facility we use, we may need to have a single point of entry just for the board meeting and literally cordon off other hallways so that people who, may pose as coming to the school board meeting don't end up, in the basement of the high school doing who knows what. So, like we said, the pendulum is swinging back now. So the concerns we had 2.5 years ago, we're now contemplating again.
But the safety, I think the safety concern doesn't go away, right? I mean, the safety concern is still top of mind, and the kids' safety is more important than ever. When we talk about having classes outside, I think about safety issues. When we talk about having the board meetings open to the public in the schools again, I think about safety. We got to balance. I don't think it's a balance of the two. I think safety still has to come first. And I think the students' and teachers' safety and the faculty's safety is, honestly, to me, more important than ours. That being said, I think that, having the meeting in a school setting puts the students and faculty at more risk than they should be, right?
Right.
That's really my concern.
Yeah, and not that this body are a group of strangers or necessarily an outside entity, but the Department of Health has been clear to limit, if not prohibit, outside access to your facilities. From a safety standpoint, but certainly a health standpoint. So it's a vicious cycle. There are many issues with any possible solution that we'll just have to process.
Comments, thoughts? All right, I guess we'll see what happens this week, whether the order is extended or not, and we will revisit this again. Okay, anybody else have any new business, board comments? All right, so this will close the public portion of our meeting. We will be adjourning to executive session. Can I get a motion to close the public portion of the meeting and move to exec, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.